Kapadia. Thanks for inviting Peter to this event and also coordinating all the communications with him. Just 1 minute, something popped up. Well, you know, National Academy of Psychology is one of the group of it's an academy of psychologists, which is of, you know, International Union of Psychology. It does work in different areas of psychology and has a membership and very valued members, you know, from across the country. We specialize, we work in the area of social psychology, cultural psychology, cognitive psychology, neuropsychology, in fact, almost all areas of psychology. And we organize one convention every year and some regional workshops and seminars. And we bring out one of our best journal, Psychological Studies, which is published by Springer. I have my entire team present here and a lot of now members present. Glad to welcome all of you to today's seminar. Peter, of course, is a professor in Iowa State University and works, as you know, on aging. Instead of introducing Peter, I would rather request Professor Sagufa Kapadia, who has invited Professor Peter Martin to introduce him. And, you know, it's just, I'm part of your larger formalities. So if you take over, and also
sure.
Come back to me, I'm not formally chairing it. You take the question.
Sure. Absolutely.
I'll rather enjoy listening.
Thank you so much, Professor Minati Panda, for facilitating and encouraging me actually to, kind of organize this webinar. So really, thank you for that. And a warm welcome to everybody. Good evening, warm wishes for the new year to everybody. A special welcome to our guest speaker, Professor Peter Martin. Thank you, Peter, really once again for waking up so early on what I'm sure, like we talked about it, a cold winter morning in Iowa, to share your thoughts and insights on this very relevant theme. Maybe you want to get yourself another steaming cup of coffee to, wade through this event. As everybody knows, the topic of today's webinar is aging in the 21st century, opportunities and challenges. I'll just say a couple of words about the theme to set the stage, so to speak. And we're all aware that the population of older persons is growing rapidly. And just to share some figures, in 2019, there were 703 million persons 65 years or over in the world. And this number is projected to double to 1.5 billion in 2050. And with reference to India, the older population is projected to touch 194 million in 2031, which is like a 41% increase in over a decade. When we kind of think about the topic of aging in the academic context, largely scholars have focused on the difficulties and challenges of increasing aging populations. And across the world, one finds that policymakers are essentially preoccupied with the potential negative impacts of population aging and rising life expectancies on health and pension entitlements. And while we know that these problems are serious and need attention, but I think what also needs equal attention or even more attention are the potentially positive aspects of an aging society, something that scholars have referred to as the longevity dividend. So we need to become cognizant of the potential upside of the aging of society. And as the demography changes, societies of the world will need to evolve models that encompass this growing trend of increasing older populations. And I am not an expert on this subject at all, but I've read references to what is termed as re-engineering of societal institutions like schools, colleges, families even, which have never been designed and did not develop to serve a population with this age distribution. So in general, I think we as people and as societies need to review and perhaps reconceptualize such that age-related equity is enhanced and there is better quality of life among all people in the population. So with this, I am honored to introduce to all of you Professor Peter Martin. He is an internationally renowned researcher in the area of aging and a leading authority on the role of personality in adult development. Professor Peter Martin is University Professor of Human Development and Family Studies at Iowa State University. The title of University Professor is bestowed on a faculty member whose professional work has focused on effecting positive, significant institutional change at Iowa State. Professor Peter received a PhD in Human Development Family Studies from the Pennsylvania State University and a Doctor of Philosophy in Psychology from the University of Bonn in Germany. He's a fellow of the Gerontological Society of America and is the current editor-in-chief of the Journal of Adult Development. Professor Martin has had faculty appointments in Germany and has served as the Nehru Chair Professor at the MS University of Baroda, and we're so proud of that. Yeah. Can you hear me now? Sorry about that. Yeah. Sorry about that. So Professor Peter Martin's CV is more than 50 pages long. It's very dense. He has just more than 200 publications in reputed journals, books, chapters in books. So the list of grants to his credit is long. He himself has been a grant reviewer. Actually, Dr. Peter Martin is an institutional change agent, and he has led Iowa State's interdepartmental gerontology program for many, many years. And in fact, he has been instrumental in laying the foundation for Iowa State's master's and doctoral degrees in gerontology, and has encouraged and mentored more than 100 undergraduate and graduate students. His colleagues describe him as a superb scholar, an excellent administrator, and an exceptional mentor. His landmark work in understanding factors that contribute to healthful patterns of aging and longevity, as well as his service to the International Centenarian Consortium, have made him a world leader in gerontology. Over the span of his career, Professor Martin has secured over $11 million in external support, including grants from National Institutes of Health, National Institute of Mental Health, and National Science Foundation, all very reputed organizations, as we are aware. And his contributions to the discipline are far-reaching. His studies with centenarians are really, really very unique and very, very relevant. And these studies have been done not just in the US, but also across cultures like in Germany, Sweden, India, and Japan. Professor Martin's contributions to his field have earned him a reputation not only as a top researcher who has achieved and contributed at all levels, but also a hardworking, sincere, friendly, and caring human being. And I could not agree more to this. With this, I warmly invite Professor Peter Martin to deliver his talk.
Well, thank you so much, Shagufa, for your very, very kind words. I'm glad it was taped. Maybe I should get it taped and play it back from time to time.
Yes.
I'm really honored.
Why not?
I'm honored to be here and talk with you about my favorite subject, which is, of course, on aging and to look at the 21st century. So thank you for inviting me. It's really a great pleasure. I have always had a great respect for India as a country, for Indian philosophy, for my many interchanges I had with wonderful scholars from India, such as Shagufa and others. And so I couldn't be more pleasant to be here on an early morning. It is still dark outside here where I am, so I put all my lights on, so it looks like there's a little bit daylight here yet. So let me try to share my screen here. And I hope you can see this. Is this coming up for you to see? Yes. Okay, so aging in the 21st century, opportunities and challenges. I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about both sides of aging. We don't want to be too positive, but certainly we don't want to be too negative on aging, simply because we still have a lot of stereotypes in this country and probably in most places in the world about what aging is like. Nobody wants to get older. Everybody wants to stay as long wants to stay young, but as long as possible. So there's this contradiction that we have right here in the title. But when we talk about opportunities and challenges, I have in mind that we can talk about 5 challenges and opportunities which I think are at the forefront of our discussion. And there are probably more than those 5 that I'm going to talk about here today. But those are the ones that I want to focus on because I think they're perhaps, at least from our perspective, most relevant. Shagufa has already talked about the amazing increase in the older population all over the world. And so we'll start certainly with that as a challenge and as an opportunity. But truth be told, even though I'm trained as a psychologist, most of the studies in aging are really health-related. So there are health-related challenges that we need to talk about, but also look at them as opportunities: physical health, functional health, cognitive health, and mental health. The third challenge that I think most people may not, at least from the scientific perspective, focus much on is the changing family structure that aging brings about. It's not only that people get older, certainly it changes the entire family structure. You could be a centenarian, and that is wonderful for many people to reach such an old age, but it also means that you have children who are in their 70s, and they are still your children. And so that makes for interesting new opportunities, but also certainly for caregivers, this provides some challenges as well. But early in the lifespan, certainly there's a number of changes in work and retirement patterns, certainly that we see here in the United States and in many other countries that are also affected by an aging population. So I'll briefly address those, and I'll finish up with a few comments on policies and policy changes that I think are in order as we look at this large increase in older populations. So these are the 5 main areas I'd like to talk about here today. And let me start with the increase in the older population. The next slide is easy for me to focus on because Shagufa mentioned, I think, the very same numbers. And there are many numbers on here. I want to highlight just the first row to indicate that, yes, indeed, looking globally speaking, we now have 703 million older people in the world, around the world. And that is a large number. But if you see what the increase is in just 30 years, which is just one generation, we will double that number, more than double that in the world to 1,548,000,000 people all over the world who are 65 years and older. And I know it wasn't too long ago, I don't know now, but in places like India, we often talk about aging starting at 60 as a chronological age. So these numbers would be much, much higher if you add this group of people to it. But I think this particular slide is very, very telling too, because aging occurs in all countries around the world. But you can see when we look at it by region, what the difference is in here. We are here on the bottom at 2015, just a couple of years ago, we projected to 2050. And you can already see in 2015, the largest number of older people could be found in Asian countries, in Asia, in this continent. You know, we're always proud of our aging population in North America, but as you can see, it's actually fairly stable compared to many other countries. Great increases more in Latin American percentage-wise. But look at the increase that we see in the next 30 years in Asia. Already strong number of strong population of older adults, 400 million or so in 2015. And clearly, when we talk about aging, we need to pay attention to Asian countries. Certainly, China, Japan, India. All of these are countries that will pay a lot more attention to in the coming years. Here's another interesting perspective that often people don't realize that makes it sometimes somewhat of a challenge to deal with aging populations, is how fast and rapid this change is in the countries all over the world. What this is basically showing is the change of population from 7% of a population that is 65 years and older to 14%. So basically doubling in percentage. And the question here is, how long does it take countries to adjust to an aging population? And the example that's often given with an early forerunner of this is France. You can see they started to have a population 65 years and older, percentage of 7% in 1880, and it took them 120 years to 1980 to reach 40% of their population being older adults. They had 120 years of time to adjust to it. In Sweden, a little bit shorter. Here in the United States, we started on the percentage of 70%. But I want you to focus on these more recent.
Peter, I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt for a second. I really request everybody. I mean, I think there is one person whose mic is on, one or two people. Please, it really is disturbing. Please make sure that your mics are on mute. Please, everybody, please check. Sorry about that, Peter. And yeah, please continue.
No, thank you for saying that. It's so easy to forget that.
I know. But you know, yeah. Sorry, please continue.
But, thank you. So look at these more recent developments in South Korea, in China, in Thailand, and Brazil, and how rapidly these populations are aging. So again, we are talking about moving from 7% of an aging population to 14%, and this is only happening in 2010 years or so. So very rapid population, and these changes really affect these countries greatly. We don't have the numbers for India yet because India is just about ready, or maybe has just recently reached 7%. So I would imagine India would go through the same process of a rapidly changing aging population, much like we see it in South Korea and China. And not like it has been in France or Sweden or other European countries or here in North America. You don't have much time to prepare for an aging population is basically the message. So you have a challenge here, and of course with it the opportunities to come. And so when we talked earlier about gerontology programs in India, then you will see that your aging process will be much faster than we have seen in other countries. Here's the current population of India. I think, again, Shagufa already highlighted this briefly. In 2019, so very recently, 87 million people in India that are 65 years and older. And in just 11 years, that will increase by another 50% to 128 million people that are 65. And you can see that here we see in 2019, the percentage of the older population in India is 6.4%. We talk about 7% is when we often use this as a criterion for aging population. And this will then increase to 8.6% in just 10 or 11 years or so. So again, a rapid change in India and in other countries of the world. But since many of us are in human development, this is another graph that I think showcases the changes that we see all over the world and the challenges that we see. And this is basically the percentage of not only older people in a country, but compared to children in a country, young children. So two groups that often do need some help and see certainly some challenges. And in 1950, if we look again at a world perspective, about 13% or so of the population was 5 years and older. And then you see this percentage declining over time. And just very recently, here's 2020, 2021, and 2022, very recently we have seen this crossover. So now we have even fewer children to be expected in the future and coming years, and we have a dramatic increase of the older population, 65 years and older. And we see this in many communities in the United States already. In Iowa, where I live, there are school closings every year just because there are not enough children. And so particularly in rural areas, schools are closing. And at the same time, where there's a school that's closing, we see an assisted living or a care facility coming up. Alone here in Ames, we have now, I think, 6 or 7 care facilities for older adults. And so there are dramatic changes, not only for population, but also changes that we see in our communities. The next point to make is that we're not only seeing an aging population, but we see particularly a population that increases above the age of 65 years old. If you're today 65 years old in many countries, this is an average for across all countries, globally speaking, you can expect right now to live another 17 or 18 years. And in just a few years, that will increase to 19, maybe even 20 years. So if you're 65 today, you can expect to have a fourth of your life in front of you. So it's not just a few years that are being left here from 65 to 68 or 69. Many people now who are 65 should well expect to live into their 80s, 90s, or even 100s. And I'm saying this because life expectancy at age 65 is an average, 50%. So 50% of everybody who's alive today and 65 years old will live to year 84 or 85 by the year 2045. So there's a large number of people who will live a lot longer than that, because this is not everybody. This is just the top 50% compared to the bottom 50%. And so there are a lot of people that we can expect to see in their 80s and 90s. So here, this is a graph that will demonstrate this again more clearly from the year 1950 in here, where really people in their hundreds and 90s, so these are nonagenarians and centenarians, were barely visible if you look at it all over the world again. And you can see that the number of centenarians is slightly increasing over time. You see a more dramatic increase for people who are between 95 and 99. But look at the number of people who we can expect to live well into their 90s, from 90 to 94. You can see almost nobody in 1950, and then this dramatic increase already by 2030. And then, of course, we have a very, very large increase, so that by 2050, we expect more than 76 million people 90 years and older worldwide. So we're not only talking about aging, but we talk about a group of aging that is the fastest growing segment of our population. Those that are 90 years and older, we call them the oldest old. When I started to research, that number started at 85 years and older, but then our National Institutes of Health decided that was too many people. So they redefined oldest old as 90 years and older. So that's how we see these numbers. So a great increase in the population. And even if you look at centenarians alone, you can see that there's a dramatic increase here too, about 34,000 worldwide in 1950. And that number will increase to 3.1 million people by the year 2050. So here too, this dramatic increase from 2030 to 2050. We have less than 10 years, 8 years to prepare for this. It's hard to believe. We have a major change. Another marker that we often use, as I'm sure many of you know, is life expectancy. And here you can see life expectancy by different countries. Our leading champion is Japan, which is why from time to time go to Japan and study our oldest old people in this country. 84.6 years as life expectancy. And you can see then the number goes down here. We see some smaller countries, and then European countries, Italy, Sweden, also Australia, Switzerland. And I always point out the United States. Our friends here in the United States don't like to see this graph because we don't like to be 42nd in anything. And so we're declining in rank. And so I'm saying that as a challenge, really, to say we've got to do something and maybe learn from other countries of what to do. India is still toward the bottom in life expectancy. I'm sure you know this, but I'm pointing this out to again remind you of the earlier graph. Your aging transformation is coming. It's not like you're going to stay there. As a matter of fact, when Japan and Italy increase maybe by a few months a year in terms of life expectancy, India will see this coming in years. So moving from 68 to 70 to 75 to 80, just like everybody else. And so, you know, we know in statistics something about the regression to the mean. Well, we'll have the progression to the mean in India, where you will catch up with everybody else very, very quickly, which will provide specific challenges. So life expectancy is increasing. Most countries, including developing countries, show a steady increase in longevity over time. And of course, the question then is, how much further does life expectancy increase? I said less so in Japan and European countries, but more so in countries like India. Of course, you'll probably say, but what about COVID? You may have seen the news in your country as much as in our country. The message here is that India dropped life expectancy by 2 years just through COVID-19. And it's even more so in the United States. I think we've lost 2.5 years in life expectancy. This is a little bit of a misnomer because life expectancy, when you hear these numbers and hear these statistics, always refers to birth. So it is about people who are born in this particular year. So we talk about life expectancy now, we talk about babies born in 2021 or 2022. I hope they're not affected by COVID-19. And so actually, there's not going to be a whole lot of change, most likely for this next generation for life expectancy of newborns. But it is statistics, and we presume if we have COVID now, we might have it again sometime in the future. So that's certainly something to consider to have in here. So what are the key messages of this population aging? Well, it's a global phenomenon. Every country in the world is experiencing growth in life expectancy, but the population aging is faster in Eastern and Southeastern Asia and in Latin America and the Caribbean, percentage-wise, compared to other countries. So we need to pay attention to it. What are the opportunities here? A lot of people will say, oh my gosh, we have to prepare for all these dependent people. Well, a lot of older people are not that dependent anymore as they might have been in the past. And what we often like to emphasize is if you now live into your 70s, 80s, or 90s, you're given a second life. Life expectancy in 1900 was 47 years in the United States, 47. Now it is almost 80 years. And so there is a second life. We can form, we can enjoy our life and our community and our families much, much longer than we have before. We also need to recognize that a lot of older people make a lot of important contributions to society. Here in the United States, our older adults are the ones who are volunteering. They're the ones who are still employing people because they're working longer. They're still purchasing, buying a lot of things that younger people cannot afford. So there are a lot of opportunities that we need to think about with this older population. But to cite one of our great baseball players, Mickey Mantle, or maybe it was Mae West, Hubie Blake, who were actors in the United States, if I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. There's a lot of truth in this statement. And so the second challenge and opportunities for us to talk about is health. And the first part I want to briefly emphasize is physical health. Here too, we have a country comparison between India and some other countries. And what you see here is a health score that can range from 0, I suppose, to 100. And then on the bottom here, you see different age groups. And this is divided by men and by males and females. And you can see that the graph here doesn't look so great. As people are older, they report to be in poorer health or have a poorer health score. So, for 18 to 50-year-olds, young adults or emerging adults, 85% of everybody here in China indicated that their health was good. A little less in India here, 70% of our young adults to midlife say their health or have a health score that is somewhat positive. But if you look at in India here, for people 80 years and older, the health score has dropped to 45% for men and even lower to 40% for women. So objectively speaking, if you look at the health score that looks at diseases and health conditions, it doesn't look like such a great story. But our own work on centenarians tells us a slightly different story, and that's where we come in as psychologists. If you look at the subjective assessment of, if you ask people, what about your health? Is it, would you describe it as poor, fair, good, or even excellent? Most people, and these are people 100 years and older, in the United States, in our recent comparison to Japan, indicate that their health is either good or excellent. There are very, very few people who indicate their health is poor. There are very few people even who say that it's fair. The majority of people, you can see here in Japan, even 60% say it's excellent, and then another 10%, so 70%, who say their health is good. And this very simple question seems to be very, very powerful because it allows people to look at your own view of health. So yes, you may have a little bit of arthritis, and that would take you down in terms of scores. You may even have a chronic condition, but that doesn't mean that your overall health perception is very, very bad. So that's actually an important distinction, is what your doctor tells you. It's not necessarily how you feel in terms of your physical health. But we do have challenges. As you can see in here, in a few different countries. If you look here on the left side, you see heart disease in 3 countries, the United States, England, and Europe overall being a major problem. Certainly hypertension, high blood pressure being one of the leading physical conditions, but it is very treatable now today. We will have to talk about diabetes a little bit. Cancer is obviously a threatening disease for many people, but really it isn't as prevalent as some of these others. Same with lung disease now. But look at this graph in here. The problem that we often see in older adults, the challenges that we talk about, are not so much in these chronic organic diseases as they are in what we call functional abilities. I'll talk a little bit more about this later on. But you can see mobility impairment is really what some of the challenges in here. 60% of people, and these are now people 50 to 74, they're not centenarians, indicating that they have problems walking, being mobile. And so when we talk about health, it's not just the chronic diseases that we talk about. But one of the chronic diseases that truly we want to deal with is the issue of obesity, excessive accumulation and storage of fat in the body. And this is the entire population, not just older people. But you can see here in the United States, we have a big problem with this. 33% of all population is obese, not just overweight. This is a BMI, if you know something about the BMI, I'm sure many of you know, of 30 and above. So it's, well, if you want to know what 30 is, some of you might remember our former President Trump. He was a little bit over that 30. So, but a lot of people have a lot more weight than that. You can see why Japan might be one of the leaders in life expectancy. Only 5% of that population is obese. And here in India, the latest numbers that I find about 12.8%. So don't imitate us, is my message in the United States, because it's really not very healthy for you. And we know why we have so many obese people. It's basically a caloric intake. We're eating too much in the United States. There's no ifs and buts about it. When people come to the United States and go to a restaurant or with friends, that's the first thing they see, how much we have on a plate and how much we eat. And you can see we indicate that really we need about 2,000 to 2,500 calories a day to function very, very well. 2,000 for women, 2,500 for men. You can see here in the 1930s, in the United States and in England, we were already way above that. And that's almost 100 years ago. And you can see it continues to climb, 3,700 calories a day in the United States, when you only need 2,500. It's got to be stored as fat. And again, China, you see also going way above the 2,500. India also increasing, but you're still below that. So again, don't imitate us. Stay where you are. If you come to India, I always marvel that your caloric intake is so much healthier, so much better than in the United States. So that's very, very important. We know that when we talk about health, physical health, what some of the risk factors are. Certainly obesity is one. We talked about hypertension, having too much weight as measured now by the high risk waist-hip ratio, too much alcohol consumption, smoking too much, physical activity. Those are the major risk factors. And that's where the opportunity is, because when we talk about physical health, it's not just all fate. We can do something about it. We can become more physically active. We can have a healthier lifestyle. And that is really what we're advocating as an opportunity. If people realize that this is not just bad luck that they're having. And for the most part, these risk factors are indeed modifiable. If you look at some countries in here, these are the risk factors I talked about. And you can see over time, or certainly with age group comparisons, we see that in all countries, these risk factors are increasing. So here's the opportunity for us to do something about it. Also, countries can invest more in healthcare. This is a graph that's a classic graph indicating that the more health spending you have per capita, the higher your life expectancy. So it's really an exponential growth in here. You can see Norway and Denmark, some of the European countries clustering in here. And because they're spending more amounts on health and health prevention, they also have higher life expectancy. The two outliers are here in India, still very, very low, with a very little spending in health care. And also that's one of the reasons why life expectancy is very, very low. And of course, here in the United States, we spend a lot more than other countries, but we don't seem to get the benefits from it because of our very obsolete healthcare system that we have. Already talked about functional health in here and the importance of mobility. These are often mentioned as activities of daily living, and this comes from one of our own studies where we say, well, it's important to stay physically healthy, but you also want to be able to walk, you want to take care of your daily activities, go shopping, cook, do your own housework, take care of your financial affairs. And when we compare three age groups, people in their 60s, people in their 80s, and then centenarians, you'll see almost all of our sexagenarians in their 60s can do all these, almost 100%. But even people in their 80s do very, very well in doing all these daily activities. But something happens from 80 to 100, where we see this major gap in almost all of these activities. Yes, many people can still talk on the phone, but walking is the big item. Only 10% of centenarians can walk without any assistance. This is in the United States, in the state of Georgia, being able to shop, cooking, housework. So all of these are more and more impaired. This is a challenge, an opportunity for us to make sure that people can continue to engage in those activities, because if they can't, then families have to become the caregivers, or they have to go to a care facility. Even looked at it longitudinally speaking, over time, these are 14 of these activities, or 13 actually, that we tested. And you can see for people in their 60s, they can, over time, there's no change. They can do all these activities. We're beginning to see a slight decline in our 80s group, but look at the centenarians. They already started a much lower time, and in a much shorter amount of time, they decrease in these activities of daily living, or what we call accelerated decline. So this is what, as gerontologists, we have to work on, is to make sure that people not only stay physically healthy, our medical community is helping us out there, but these are often psychological issues to keep up those activities because they're important for us. Another challenge for us when we talk about health is related to dementias, and you can see here again from 2010, recent times, 2020 to 2050, how we have this exponential increase in people who have a dementia, Alzheimer's disease being the primary one to talk about. But there's also a discrepancy between high-income countries and low and middle-income countries. The major increase we see is in low and middle-income countries in terms of dementias. A lot of work that needs to be done. The good news is that we know more and more what prevents or delays the onset of dementias, and the message is pretty clear. You have to exercise your brain. You cannot just exercise your body. And if you do, you're more likely to avoid or at least delay the onset of dementias. Our centenarian data here in the United States and in Japan show this also very clearly. This is a mental status questionnaire, 30 questions basically. Either you get them all wrong, you get a 0, or you get them all right, you get a 30, or anywhere in between. But you can see in terms of frequency, we have people all over the place. There are people who still perform extremely well, particularly our centenarians in the United States. Still a percentage of people who get all of these questions right. We have people who don't get any of them right. These are people with dementia, but there's a lot of variability in between. And so that tells us this is not just fate. Not everybody will end up down here, but it is hard work to maintain your level of cognitive functioning. Same is true for mental health. As an issue, just very briefly in here, there's a lot of questions that we ask about mental health. This is the one that stands out when we talk about with centenarians. The one thing that they're really concerned about is that they feel worthless. They're still physically there, they're cognitively there, but in many ways, society has already pushed them away and says, well, we'll take care of you. You don't need to do anything. And they still want to contribute to society. So every third centenarian is feeling that way. And the second aspect of mental health is what we indicate as a decline in positive emotions. Centenarians in the United States are not so much increasing in negative emotions or feelings, but not enough positive things are happening in the life of a centenarian. Here again, 3 age groups, high scores for people in the 60s, a beginning decline for people in the 80s, and then you already see centenarians have a significantly lower score at baseline, and over just 20 months, there's an accelerated decline in positive emotions, not enough positive things happening to older adults. So let me talk very briefly about family and social support opportunities and changes in here too. Just basically two aspects in here. Family structures are changing with the changing population. I always like to emphasize this as a graph in here where we have 4 generations. Many families in the United States are now 4-generation families, with the oldest generation, the second, the third. So these are the children, grandchildren, and then the great-grandchildren. And then we described them in the past as bottom-heavy families. So we had lots of children, lots of cousins, parents were alive, very few grandparents, and certainly very, very few great-grandparents surviving. So a bottom-heavy family. Many families in India, I suspect, are like that. And this is now moving very fast, very quickly to what we call a top-heavy family. Families decide to have fewer children. There's less fertility. Parents survive. Grandparents survive. Now, a lot of young adults have living grandparents and more than 1 or 2, and maybe even living great-grandparents. So we're moving basically population change from these different structures. As people live longer, have fewer children, family structures are transformed. And certainly, if you do need care as an older adult in your 80s or 90s, there are fewer options for care. You may only have 1 child, and that child may not live where you live. Certainly not in the United States, where we have a lot of mobility, but you see some of that in India and in Japan as well, where people move to different places, not only in the in their country, but to other countries of the world. So there's a family dilemma. Who is the caregiver? If you don't have any children, a lot of our young adults now here decide it's not worth the expense or the trouble, or maybe not even responsible to have children. Well, who is there to take care of you when you get to be older? What we see very often now is that what we call the young old, people in their 60s and 70s, taking care of old adults, people in their 90s and even hundreds. We've even had in our study a centenarian who was a caregiver to her daughter. She was the one who drove her daughter to the doctor miles and miles away from the health clinic because the daughter could not. So very interesting family changes that we have in here. And here's some data from Japan. I suspect in India we'll see similar patterns very soon, if not already, where in 1960, most people live with a married child. 90% of all older adults in Japan live with an adult child. And you've seen how this has decreased by 2000, now we're in 2020. And I would suspect that even fewer people in Japan, maybe 50-40% who live with families, more people living with a spouse only, more and more older adults in Japan living alone, was never thought of something that was possible. And then also the number of older adults increasing in institutions, care facilities. And so a tremendous change that we see, and an opportunity for us to think about different ways of taking care of older people. But support is not all bad. Here again is an opportunity. We always ask this question in our studies. Are there people you can depend on to help you if you really need it? And I always like to show this graph to indicate that social support in Japan and the United States is very, very strong. There's nobody in our study who strongly disagrees with this statement. There are a few people who disagree, but most people very, very strongly agree or agree with this statement. But look at Japan. There's not a single person who we interviewed who would even say agree. They all strongly agree there are people who are there to support. Or as we always say, when we look at centenarians, if you want to get to be 100, you cannot get there alone. You do need support, and you have support, because families are still very strong, even in countries like the United States, where mobility is so more obvious. People still take care of their own family members, and that's really a good point. I'm almost running out of time in here, but I want to very briefly talk about work and retirement as well, because there are important changes that we see in here too. The Gallup poll in the United States asked repeatedly, at what age do we expect to retire? And in 1995, not that long ago, people on average would say, well, we expect to retire at age 60. But then when you ask in 2018, this had changed, and people thought about, well, if I retire, it will not be before I'm 66 years old. So a 6-year increase in expectations. But then if you look at reality of people when they actually did retire, in 1995, the same year that people expected to retire at age 60, the actual age was 58. And when you ask, well, on what age did you actually retire in 2018? It hadn't changed that much. Yes, it has increased a little bit, but the average retirement age, even though there is no mandatory retirement for most jobs in the United States, has only moved up to 61. So once again, you are 60, you have 20 years in front of you, and you need to finance this, society needs to finance this. So the patterns of work retirement are shifting. There's a shrinking ratio of workers to pensioners because there are more and more older people moving into retirement. And we can see this in this particular graph in here. I know it's a very busy graph, but what it basically means is how many workers do you have per retiree? And so in this graph in here, the top is 5. And that would be here in Russia, but let's look at the United States, the red line. So we have 4 workers basically supporting 1 retiree in 2020, so right now. And again, as you move to toward the next century, that will decrease to 2 workers per retiree. So only half of the population is supporting a larger number of older adults. The reason why I have a second graph in here is because the y-axis is different. So now we're not talking about 0 to 5, we are talking about 0 to 15. And I wanted to point out India to you. Right now in India, there are 10 workers for each retiree, so a lot more than in the United States. But look what happens in the same time frame. India too is moving toward only 2 workers per retirees, with a much, much larger percentage of people. So a tremendous challenge and opportunity. How do we change this? Well, here's our opportunity that I believe Mathilda Riley in the 1980s first talked about. Right now, we are separating our lifespan into first education, children, adolescents, young adults. As a matter of fact, we're keeping a lot of our adults in the educational system way into their 30s with our doctoral degrees. Some of the best working years are really spent in education. Then there's some time for work, then there's retirement. In order to solve some of the issues that retirement and work bring about, we really need to rethink that we need to educate ourselves, particularly in our fast-moving society, throughout the entire life cycle. We need to work perhaps a little earlier than we have, but also stay a bit later than we have. And we need to leave enough time for leisure time, retirement time, basically, throughout the life cycle. Wouldn't it be nice if young parents could take a year or 2 or 3 of their retirement account and then pay that back later on in life? So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to move into this. So I'll finish up with some social policies and opportunities to talk about. Our aging society comes at a very high economic cost, no doubt about it, particularly if we continue the way that we have, pensions, retirement incomes, increase in need for longer periods of time. More care assistance, certainly because we have more people, more older people with more healthcare costs. We need to solve that as a problem, as a challenge. But population aging does not lead inevitably to a macroeconomic decline. With well-chosen policies, just the opposite may be true. Older people contribute to society and certainly also to our macroeconomic well-being. Certainly, we can provide opportunities for health management, prevention. We need to focus on that. Policy-wise, some of our healthcare systems are moving in that direction. We need to support families in their support function to older adults. We need to provide lifelong educational opportunities, as I mentioned before, and meaningful work opportunities, maybe second careers that allow people to contribute to society so that they don't feel worthless even beyond their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And here's an interesting aspect that some people have pointed out, that this global aging, particularly in developing countries, may lead to greater peace, stability, prosperity, and democracy, because societies that count on a very young age structure tend to be prone more to show violence and instability. There's a clear correlation between youth and violence. And if you have an older population, we hope perhaps that we have also a more peaceful society. Here's basically a change that we've seen in healthcare improvement that goes through all facets of our lives. In the 1800s, it was an age of environment. We took care of our city, water, of public health campaigns, insulin came about. We then had the age of medicine, penicillin, TB drugs, coronary heart disease more under control. Then still more recently, the age of what we call the age of lifestyle. Now we have the age of biotechnology that helps us increase our lifespan, and perhaps we are moving now to sort of a computer robotic time frame that helps us even more in those directions. I want to finish up with a slide that brings back to what Shagufa earlier talked about, the longevity dividend that is discussed among gerontologists quite a bit today. Not so much about increasing life expectancy by itself in years, but slowing down the aging process. We can do this with better healthcare. We can do this with our lifestyle changes. And so that's really what it's all about. It provides opportunities and indicates that we will get a longevity dividend if we take charge of our own aging process, if we take control, if we take some responsibility for our own aging by better taking care of ourselves, as we indicated early on. That would lead to lower healthcare costs for us and for society. It promotes us to save much earlier and longer. A lot of people don't realize they live into their 90s and even hundreds, and you don't want to run out of savings and money. Older worker productivity would be higher if people are healthy and can work longer. There's also an increase in volunteering that we see with people who stay healthier longer, and there will be more family time that we can enjoy. If you look at the relationship between grandparents and grandchildren, both generations can really benefit from it. And Leopold Rosemeyer from Austria, already in 1983, wrote a book that influenced me going into gerontology called Late Freedom, indicating that really as we move into very late life, we can gain a lot of individual freedoms. Here's a quote from his book: "When aging, one has to learn how to find one's own way of life by experiments, trial and error. Society is not only to permit this, it should make it possible." So I think that's a good guide for challenges and opportunities in the future. So longevity in our mind is the social revolution of the 21st century. Things will never be the same. There are 5 main challenges that I've tried to point out. Certainly population changes are driving all of that, which is why we call this the demographic imperative. We have 10 years to prepare for a major increase in our aging populations all over the world, as you've seen. It is imperative that we prepare. In our educational systems, we talked about universities, programs that teach and prepare practitioners and professionals as in society and as it is in our own families. There are clearly health changes that we've seen that we need to address. Family and social support is a critical opportunity and challenge. In all these changes that we see in populations, the family bond is still very strong and will drive the positive aspects of aging, because we love our families. We love our parents and our children, our grandchildren. Work and retirement will change, and we also have to address social policies. So we can influence our healthy aging longevity by engaging in more effective lifestyles. Of course, we know that what that is: more exercise, better nutrition, more support can go a long way. So with that, I appreciate it. I want to thank you for your attention, for your time. There's a lot more that could be said about any of these aspects, but I wanted to give a brief overview of what is upon us as we move now, not only to the beginning, but through the 21st century. A lot of great opportunities, a lot of challenges.
Okay. Wonderful, Peter. I mean, just so much in like a very short span of time. So wonderful. I think we're now opening for question answers. Ramakrishnan, do you want to moderate? Anybody has any comments, questions, taking all the information in? So the floor is open.
Well, I am still waiting for questions. No questions have come yet. But let me thank you, Professor Martin, for the kind of deliberations that we listened to just recently. It covers a whole range of activities of human life. And in that sense, getting old is a reality, and we must invest in old age from a young age. So that is the key home message that I can take. And the best part is that the varieties of dimensions that we are talking of, it would be better if the researchers from different fields can sit together and plan the future policies depending on the country's needs and future aspirations. We can have a better retired life or old age, or maybe longevity. That's what I can say.
Well said. And I'm glad you're pointing out the importance of interdisciplinary work. We cannot do this as psychologists alone. I have enjoyed over many decades now my work with people in the medical and healthcare community, sociologists who look at the broader social aspects of this. Certainly as psychologists, we look at personality, we look at memory, functioning, cognition, but all of these are intertwined. And so, we know, for instance, now that physical exercise has a great part to play of how we continue to function cognitively in later life. So it is our kinesiologists who say, if you exercise, yes, you will be physically healthier, but it's also good for your brain. We've actually seen studies where now, if you look at some brain scans, that the volume of your brain increases as you exercise. And so you're actually increasing, you're making new synapses. So that's one example out of many that we could mention, how different disciplines have to work together to understand the field of aging. And I want to say one more thing that I didn't emphasize much in my talk, because we have said it for so long, maybe we're just getting tired of saying it. But there are a lot of stereotypes about aging. There's a lot of negative connotations about aging. And it's hard to combine, hard to change this viewpoint in people. Even when I hear people say, well, I'm 70 years old, but I don't feel 70. Well, there is a little bit of a stereotype or an implicit bias of age when you say, I don't feel like 70. I'd rather have people say, I'm 70 and it feels great. Maybe I'm surprised at what it feels like. But don't deny that you're 70. When you are 70, tell us what it's like. So we need more positive models to say, aging is not what people think it is, which is one of the reasons why we study centenarians. Because when you get to be 100, it does turn around. Now all of a sudden says, wow, look at this person. She's 100 and she's still functioning very, very well. So being 100 is okay, but for some reason 70 or 80 or 85 is not okay. So we need to really change the perception of aging. Yes, you have challenges, no doubt, but there's a lot of positive things to happen when you're in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. More economic security for many older people. You don't have to fight in your work for acknowledgement anymore. I see my younger colleagues; they need to get tenure. They need to show I can still publish. I do still publish, but it's on my own, right? I can decide how much I want to do. So there's a lot of positive things to say about aging, but yet for some reason we still, at least here in the United States, I know some Asian countries have a lot of respect for older people that sometimes is missed here in the United States, but we need to do much better to have a more objective view of what being 60, 70, 80, or 90 is like.
I think there are some questions already, Ramakrishna. So would you want them to say, like Nirmal Patel?
I have one from Archana Jain. Archana Jain. It's like in USA, cognitive functioning of elderly is higher than those of Japan, despite the support for Japan is higher.
Yes, that's a very good observation. We do know that Japan does a fantastic job in taking care of all the older people, regardless of their condition. And I was first surprised, to give you just a quick example in here, when we ask centenarians of where they lived. And in the United States, they live at home by themselves, or maybe some with family, maybe some live in care facilities. In Japan, all of that happens too. But then some people in Japan list as their residence hospital. There are older adults in Japan who live in hospitals. Well, if you live in a hospital, you get the best care, physical care that you could imagine. And so, we do know, and my Japanese colleagues do underline this, maybe in some ways in Japan, and that may also explain part of their longevity, they're keeping people alive who, if they had the same condition in the United States, would probably not be alive anymore. And so that also explains then why there's this very large number of demented centenarians in Japan compared to the United States. They're still being taken care of. It reminds me much of some of the pictures I took in Japan. I should include this in my slideshow. In Japan, they are doing everything they can to support aging trees so that they don't fall. And so they support them with strong supports, and the same with people. So my respect to people in Japan who do everything that they can to say every life is worth living, with or without dementia, with or without physical disability, and we will support it until the very, very end. Maybe we are not quite as supportive here in the United States.
We have one more question that's about how can old age homes be institutionalized and take the responsibility of engaging the aging population?
Yeah, what we see here in the United States is actually quite positive, what we call culture change. Maybe not too long ago, 30 years or so ago, nursing homes was the last place where you wanted to be. And still, it has a stigma of, well, I'm here because nobody else supports me. But through the initiative of a number of geriatricians in the United States, we have seen that we need to change the environment of our long-term care facilities, that they do feel a lot more like home. Starting from, you can bring your own furniture to these facilities. Starting from giving people in these residential facilities more control. In the olden days, breakfast was always at 7 o'clock, and if you weren't there, we'd roll you in, whether you like it or not. And lights were out at, 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Well, now you can decide when you want to have breakfast. You can have choices of breakfast. It doesn't matter how long, if you're in your own private room, how long your lights are on. So there's really a culture change that is possible. There are animals that are allowed, dogs and cats. In the United States, people are very attached to animals, are often allowed in these facilities. So we're not quite there where we want to be, and certainly we have seen a lot more options in between the whole movement of assisted living, where you can have your meals being made for you if you live in an assisted living facility, but you also have a kitchen in your apartment. If you want to cook on your own, you can cook on your own. You don't need the support. If you want somebody to come and clean, we'll provide that to you. If you want to clean your home yourself, you can do this. You need some help with your finances, we'll help you. If you can do it your own, do it on your own. So I'm pleased to say that in the United States, perhaps we are one of the leading countries to reinvent of what care facilities are like, that we recognize with the changes that we've seen, these challenges of fewer children who can take care of their older adults because you only have one child. And if you live long enough, you may outlive your child. Not to be said that your child lives longer than you do. And if they are alive, they may move somewhere else, that we need to change the environment for older adults. And we've I think, made good progress, but we still have a ways to go.
I think I'm getting many questions, but for the interest of time, we would restrict it to the last question that I am going to ask is, so with an aging population, the world is also advancing towards robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence. What do you think will be the challenges for the corporates and governments?
Well, it's a challenge and opportunity. The challenge is if we move to robotics, are we replacing human beings that would be the caregivers that would provide us with opportunities? We see it here in the United States and India. I guess it's in the same way now too. If you want to go to a bank, you often, if you need to have some money, you don't see a person anymore to go to a machine, type in some numbers, and there comes your money. That's already robotics, so that's already machine learning of what's happening. We pay with credit cards. We buy online with Amazon.com. So we're doing everything we can to avoid people. That's not always such a good thing. And certainly, even the whole movement of using Zoom and social media is a whole new chapter and a whole new area to study for our students too. I see the first thesis and dissertations coming out where social media is replacing this person-to-person contact. And certainly COVID doesn't help with that right now either. And so the increase in loneliness, the increase in violence, unfortunately in the United States, we see more and more aggressive behavior in high schools because our high school students are just tired of being isolated and not being able to do their activities. And so if we go beyond this and think about technology, artificial intelligence, challenging our lives, then there are always two sides to this. You could use it intelligently or you could use it too much as well. The positive aspects of it are things such as smart home technology that makes it easier for older people to live in their own homes. Certainly when you can talk to Alexa or you can talk to your Google friend, they can answer every question that you may have. It will call for you. It will, certainly our smartphones have done wonders for us, for older people too, to really be more connected. So just like with everything else, technology can be a good thing, and we need to emphasize the positive aspects, but we need to also be aware that we may be losing literally the human touch as we rely too much on robotics and on technology. So hopefully we're not going to completely give that up.
Ramakrishna, maybe just a couple more questions. Yeah, Minati, because it's 6:15, but I think for 5-7 more minutes, it should be okay. Yeah, Minati, please go ahead, and then Ramakrishna, you can pick up the others. Yeah, go ahead, Minati.
When we were doing our studies, this collaboration with Heidelberg University, a couple of things we observed. I'll not talk about everything, just one I want to share, and I'll also ask a question based on that. When we analyze the language of aging policies, and especially in India, what we find that, yes, it's very important to emphasize the home, the family, taking care of the adult. But if we go by the records of adult abuse, then we cannot leave adults to their families only, So that will be our preferred site. But then we cannot promote it, uncritically, because adult abuse is also very high. And when we were analyzing UN document, like 1970s, when they drafted the first major, policy, Kruse was probably chairing that committee, and we were reading that, and then further, the revisions after that. What we found that even UN documents are moving towards this term, which Kruse loves a lot, and we were pretty critical of. That was active aging. And when we analyze the language of active aging, what we found that there is a gradual state withdrawal. Or maybe, okay, let me not talk about state withdrawal, but then we put the responsibility on the individual. And that's what the market wants. We want to put the responsibility on the old. Like, you talked about lifestyle, which is important. But suppose we talk about more of such things, then, we don't put the responsibility on the state. My fear is that when we push some of these projects like active aging, it's a very well-intended project. We also emphasize that old should learn to take care of themselves, follow particular kind of lifestyles, blah, blah, blah. We also, take the responsibility away from the state to individual. And our fear was that probably there is a bigger politics behind, whereas the state should be now coming forward more to take the responsibility. Okay, I'm saying this because the aging policy in India is clearly very, very family and individual centered. State is almost absent in many ways. And wherever the state is present, they're giving some some honor, some fees living support, allowance, like 1,000 rupees, which will be like how much? $15 US dollars. So that must they give to an old per month. So we have some such commitments which are like marginal, almost not meeting any need of the old person, but we don't guarantee their health or other kinds of security. So our fear is that, are we moving more towards this state withdrawal?
I'm glad you're pointing this out. This is really very interesting, very important for gerontologists to discuss as well, psychologists. The answer, I think, is not to only emphasize independence and individualism like we here do in the United States more than perhaps anywhere else, but the interdependence of all these different levels. Yes, there is a responsibility that every person should take for themselves to really stay as healthy as possible, to take initiative, to stay active. No government can tell you to become more active. No government can tell you to go out there that you have to exercise. But certainly we can promote healthy behaviors. Smoking is one good component here in the United States. Without the state, without government, the smoking rates have not would have not been reduced as much as they have. But certainly, if you want to quit smoking, you have to decide to do this. And certainly the family can help here as well. So what we are proposing really is not that the responsibility should only be on the individual or should only be on the state, but that all of those must work together. Because we know when the state gets involved, you get a much better deal in terms of your aging. You're not only have to take care of everything yourself, because when you look at large numbers, things become much more affordable. And if I want to buy healthcare without any support from the state, it is probably not affordable for me. And here's another aspect of it. We can talk about different income levels as we have. It's easy to say that it should all be in the family and all be in individuals for people who are poor and cannot afford to take care of themselves. It's easy for rich people to take care of themselves. So we have this economic divide that we see more and more in the United States, where the gap between the rich and the poor is getting larger and larger. And so the rich can easily say, as is often done here in the United States, the state should not be involved with individual lives because they don't need them. But the people who are at the poverty level, and we have quite a few older adults, 10% in the United States, who are under the poverty line, they cannot get themselves out, and sometimes the families can help too because they're not any richer either. So there's got to be some interdependence, I think, from my perspective, to answer that question.
Yeah. So maybe one more, Ramakrishna, you want to pick up one more question, somebody? And then we can wrap up because already it's kind of late. I think some already have been addressed. There's one question about women. Ekta, I'm just going to read that, Ramakrishna. I can see that in Asia, including India, there will be more older women. So, excuse me, do you think financial literacy awareness on healthy aging for middle-aged women will empower older women? If yes, then what measures can we take?
Yeah, and I should have said, I often do, that really the study of aging is often the study of women, because there's so many more women who the life expectancy is higher, and women live longer than men, although the gap is closing a little bit now, as perhaps we're reaching a ceiling of life expectancy. And you're absolutely right. You cannot wait to take measures or to take care of yourself. Wait until you're in your 60s, 70s, or 80s. Really, midlife is a very, very crucial time. Some of the health behaviors in midlife will forecast how well you will be aging 10, 20, 30 years down the line. So all the things that we talked about, good exercise, good nutrition, healthcare, and also these social aspects. We do know that social connections have a major health benefit in later life. So as you're thinking about your circle of friends and how much time you spend, that has a great benefit. I live here close to a recreational area, and people walk through our neighborhood to get to a lake area. And during the summertime, spring, fall, not so much now, but I see a lot of people walking by my house. Well, I see a lot of women walk by my house, and sometimes I wonder, is it about the walking or is it about the talking? And it's probably about both because I see the walk and talk. And this talking is a major, major emphasis in health promotion. And certainly you don't start that when you're in your 60s, 70s, or 80s. So choose your friends well and keep your friends. As a matter of fact, I remember very fondly in Baroda, we also lived there close to a park that Shagufa knows, a wonderful park that I like to walk through. And I saw a lot of men walking sort of before dinner. And I was very, very amazed and surprised because that you almost never see this in the United States. And so social support, health behaviors, all of those are critical in midlife so that you can prepare yourself for a healthy and successful aging later on.
I think you have very rightly pointed out that we usually do in India, we call it in our language like adda or khati. So where we do a lot of gossips without any intention, but that gives a lot of pleasure to us. So maybe it has some health benefits that now we are realizing, yes, it is contributing to positive health. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I think, I mean, I'm really seeing so many more questions, Peter, but I think, Minati, what do you think? I think we should wrap up because it's almost 6:30, 6:25. So, heartfelt thanks. I know. So we could actually, Minati, go ahead. Yeah.
One thing for us, what we found, one very major thing that disturbed us is that many in this country don't age, in the sense they accept their aging, they just vanish someday. The poor, the lower caste, they don't age. Many women don't age. Like we die at 80, but we don't age because nobody recognizes our aging. I think our problem is also very different. In America, it's also true about many blacks and many poor, but that percentage is very small. In our case, it is huge. Women, poor, the migrants, they just perish someday from this earth. They never age. I think our problems are even more.
Yeah. I think and there's just one thing that somebody posted, Peter, last thing, and I cannot resist that. Because this is very relevant, all these young adults here. So how important is the role of young adults in caretaking of elderly? So after that, we wrap it up.
Well, there are two things I might want to point out. One is young adults observe very carefully their parents being caregivers of their grandparents. So we have now models that we've never had before. When you became a caregiver 50 years or 100 years ago, you were the first ones and you hadn't seen anybody before you. Now, because we have these multiple generations, the first thing that we see in young adults is that they observe their parents as caregivers. And these are models for them. And that's positive because we have a positive model. And in many ways, these are positive aspects here in the United States. Then you'll prepare yourself better to become a caregiver. You've seen it before. And that has never happened before in human society, or very few families. The second aspect of it is young adults, when they see their grandparents, or in some cases, like great grandparents decline in health, they are willing to pitch in. And this new generation, at least here in the United States, I haven't met recently students in India, but in the United States, they are very environmentally conscious. They know about climate change. They care. They have a different sense of caring about the world, and that includes caring about their family members that they feel so closely to. Again, remember, it wasn't too long ago that you did not see your grandparents being active. Now, young adults see not only their grandparents, but they're still doing these interesting things, often together with them. And that can only be a positive image for them. So I think we see a new generation of young adults growing up with a much better understanding of what aging is all about and how to be involved in their own families in terms of the aging process. At least that's what I see here in the United States.
All right. Thank you so much. So Ramakrishnan, let's wrap it up now.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Martin, for a wonderful talk. And with this, in the early morning, you woke up and given a very insightful talk on this aging. And on behalf of National Academy of Psychology, and all the participants, those who have present here, President now Professor Minati Panda, Madam Professor Sagupa Kapadia, Developmental Psychology Division Convener, and Treasurer Dr. Tushar Singh. I thank each and everyone who has contributed to make this webinar a success, and we hope to continue this kind of talk in future also, and also have some meaningful collaborations for future research. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. Have a lovely day, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and I hope we'll be able to see each other in person to have that human connection I talked about earlier on too. So all the best to you, and stay healthy and well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Minati. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Sagu.
Bye, everybody.